Welcome to our podcast, A Novel Talk, co-hosted by Carl Lee, and I'm Wendy Kendall. My new romantic mystery, Snow Kiss Cookies to Die For, is available at all online retailers. Desiree and Leo are tangled up in romance and mystery. She's a first grade teacher, and he's on the school's maintenance staff, and they are falling in love. This holiday season, Desiree is being stalked. By who? There are several suspects, including Leo. Is he Desiree's the one or the stalker? And my mystery book, Cat Out of the Bag, that's Cat with a K for Catherine Watson. She's a purse designer and amateur sleuth who goes from designer bags to body bags when she's faced with a murder mystery. In the prequel, Pistachio Makes a Splash, Catherine and Mayor Brenda Durling investigate a chilling cold case. Now I'm busy working on the exciting sequel. Just wait until you see what Catherine's facing this time. Thank you to all the readers who've let me know how much you enjoy my books. And here comes your co-host.
Thanks, Wendy. My name is Carly, and I write paranormal thriller, paranormal fantasy, which makes me thrilled for our guest this evening because ghosts are cool. But I want to thank you for a lovely weekend, Wendy. I curled up with Desiree and Leo, and just spent the whole day watching the rain happen and finding out about snow-kissed cookies and why they're to die for.
Oh, thank you, Carl. That's so nice. And the recipes included, too.
I saw that.
Well, our national awards winning Amazon and Barnes & Noble best-selling guest author today chooses to set his narratives, whether edge-of-your-seat thriller, classical whodunit, or eerie ghost story, squarely in the realm of school, a realm he knows well. His 3+ decades of experience as a teacher, professor, and school leader has infused his writing with a rare authenticity about the world of education, even as the protagonists of his tales tackle daunting, outsized challenges. In his career, Dr. Overbeck has held a wide range of positions and has brought this knowledge and insight to the characters he's created. A member of the Mystery Writers of America, Dr. Overbeck is an active member of the literary community, contributing to a writers' critique group, serving as a mentor to emerging writers, and participating in writing conferences. When he's not writing, Dr. Overbeck is often in demand as a speaker to groups, large and small. Author of the Haunted Shores mystery series, welcome to A Novel Talk with Randy Overbeck, author Randy Overbeck.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to share the airspace with you tonight.
Well, we're delighted to have you as well. I'm going to jump right in to your some questions about Crimson at Cape May. You dangle so many red herrings, and yes, the sea reference for the herrings is intentional. Right in front of us, while we help Daryl solve many crimes in the book Crimson at Cape May, how do you determine which real clues to sprinkle in between the blind alleys?
Well, and since Crimson at Cape May is my second book, the first book, Blood on the Chesapeake, I learned from the first book to kind of up the ante in terms of twisting the reader around a little bit on their search for solving the puzzle. I first determine which are going to be the critical elements that Daryl's going to have to be able to sort out, and then I try to add a few other pieces around those clues that makes it a little bit tougher, but also I think makes it a little more interesting for the reader. I don't know that there's any magic formula that I follow to do that. It kind of comes organically from when I'm putting the story together. At least for me, it does. I don't think I have a better answer than that.
Well, it's well done. I have to tell you, I love trying to solve mysteries before the end of the book, and you had me going throughout the whole thing. Speaking of Daryl, he is an awesome character, and his OCD is only part of his charm. He seems to have been born under a bad sign, and people around him seem to get hurt. Vince, Josh, for example. Why does Daryl seem cursed?
There is a background story that I chose not to include in the second book that answers that question fairly well in the first book. But the simple answer is this: when Daryl was a young teen, he had his first ghost encounter, and because of some complicated circumstances and things he didn't fully understand at the time, it doesn't go very well, and ends up because of his misstep, and not knowing how to use the paranormal information correctly. One of his friends dies, and his brother gets maimed for life in a sledding accident in the snow. Because of that, Daryl kind of carries that weight around all the time, and is always worried at what is going to befall him and others around him when he agrees to help a ghost out. It's part of the albatross he carries as part of his gift of being able to talk to those on the other side.
Yeah, and it's an excellent piece of making him more real, making him more human. You have a lot of energy transference in the book. When Cassie and Daryl first touch hands, she feels a jolt of energy, and it's similar to what you described when Daryl touches hands with Natalie.
The medium. Right.
The medium, Natalie, yes. Casey seems to experience the sensation more than Daryl. Why is that?
Well, I think it has to do with her youth. One of the things that I have tried to work on, although this is an exception, your example, is that I've tried to work very hard in describing the paranormal elements of the story as close to what has been realistically documented as possible. So most all of the experiences that Daryl has with spirits, there's actually been scientific documentation of something similar happening in the real world. Mm-hmm. What you've selected is the one area where I have taken clear liberty license. There is no physical or no scientific evidence that energy transfers for that. But I wanted to find some way of conveying first in the first book the medium's impact on Daryl in a physical way, and I thought it made a nice connection for him to recognize that Cassie was a kindred spirit with the same transfer. I allowed Kathy's POV to be a little more vibrant with that exchange, largely because of her youth.
I loved that. I thought that was a very nice method of telling me, the reader, that connection. And as a fan of the paranormal, I'm okay with you taking non-real world liberties. Daryl reminds me of a teacher I had when I was in junior high. Daryl was very much involved in his students' lives, whether teaching history back at his regular school or at the football camp in Cape May. He takes a liking to the boy Josh at the football camp, and that leads him to help Josie Josh's sister. Can you tell what draws Daryl to this help?
Well, Daryl is, as a character, is based. It's really a composite of a number of actual real teachers that I knew, and having spent so much time in education, I was really blessed by seeing a huge number of teachers who would put the children's needs first, put their kids' needs first before themselves, would stay up forever grading papers, who would prepare the best lessons, who would take kids aside who were in trouble and try to figure out ways to help them. And I wanted one of my goals in my book was to portray a real character that's very realistically like the ones that I had seen, even though I didn't have any teachers that had paranormal abilities that I'm aware of. But I thought this part called for that particular one. So in all of the books, in each of the books, you will see in the first book, Blood on the Chesapeake, he's drawn to the murder because the murderer happens to turn out to be the murder of a young black teen many years earlier. In this case, and he teaches teenagers, so that makes him even more susceptible. In this case, same thing with Josh. And in the new book, Scarlet Crystal River, he's actually drawn to two very young children. He's dedicated his life to helping kids. And this ghost work and work with Josh just becomes one more avenue of doing that.
Yeah, excellent answer. I like that. And like I said, Daryl reminds me of a teacher I had when I was in junior high. My last question is, why are there so many ghosts in Cape May? I love it, and I hope we go back there because it's an awesome little town. Is there some interesting backstory to the town itself that has so many ghosts?
Yes, there is. When I selected my locations for all three books, I was searching for scenic, quaint locations that many people are not aware of. And Cape May clearly fits that bill. Cape May is, believe it or not, the oldest resort in the United States. People have been flocking to this beach for 170 years. And in fact, it has one of the top 10 beaches in the U.S. But when I speak to my groups all over the country and ask who's been to Cape May, hardly anyone's ever been there. So that's part of the charm of this town, is part of the reason I chose it. One of the things that also drew me to this town was it's the most haunted seaport on the Eastern Shore. So Cape May is riddled with all kinds of Victorians, bed and breakfasts and mansions, and almost every building has a ghost story attached to it. I've been on a couple of ghost tours there. I've actually interviewed an author that has written a couple of books about the ghosts of Cape May, and I actually used a few of the historical ghosts of Cape May in the fiction, in my story, because I enjoyed that so much. It's a wonderful place.
As a reader, I enjoyed it too.
That's my intent.
That's fantastic research. I love the idea of you researching all that, and that really adds a dimension to these books. I love that. In your book, Scarlet at Crystal River, your protagonists, Daryl and Aaron, are on their honeymoon in Florida. So romantic. But mystery and the paranormal never take a break. Daryl feels someone reaching out to him from beyond this world. Can you describe who is seeking help from Daryl and Daryl's internal conflict between helping but also not wanting to involve Aaron?
Well, Aaron, his girlfriend and now wife in the third book, has been his partner through most of his paranormal experiences, but she is not a sensitive. She doesn't get connections with, see, or have any way to communicate with ghosts. She has been primarily his supporter, and she was at first skeptical, but ends up believing Daryl. So Daryl's tendency in the past has generally been when these things occur, he turns to her and says, "Here's what's happening. I need your help." In this case, he's torn a little bit for two reasons, I guess. One is, well, the main reason is they're on their honeymoon, and they just got married, and he wants to spend 2 weeks with his lovely bride in this absolutely beautiful, sunny location on the Gulf Coast of Florida. And the last thing he wants to do is get involved in another ghost hunt. Plus, as Cara alluded to before, he's very leery of drawing. He knows that where the ghosts come to find him, danger is often close behind. And if he wasn't sure of that, his medium told him that ahead of time. So the last thing he wants to do is draw Aaron into the target of danger. For those reasons, he doesn't really want to do that. But it turns out that in this story, the ghosts that are reaching out to him are actually ghosts of two young children who have gone missing. Two young Latino children. So he's torn between those two forces to try to decide what to do. And he tries first denial. When that doesn't work, he ends up doing what his gut tells him he should be doing all along anyway.
It's really a struggle for him, I know. And you write that so effectively. There's so much about your writing style that just pulls me into the story, including a skilled description of the settings throughout this book and a credible storytelling of paranormal activities by the children. What is most important in effectively writing these aspects of your story?
Well, as you alluded to earlier, Wendy, I work really hard doing research. Now, I have to tell you that I'm not a native, and I don't know any of these three locations. So, the Blood of the Chesapeake is on the eastern shore of the Chesapeake Bay, and although we have visited there, I'm no native. And the same thing is true of Cape May. We've made several visits to Cape May. In this case, I had really intended to make several visits to Crystal River to get to know the place well, but the pandemic put an end to that. My wife and I were doing research in the town 2 weeks before everything shut down.
Oh my gosh.
So, in that case, we were very lucky because I was able to get the most essential stuff research done, but I had intended to go back a couple more times. With that not possible, what I've done in all the places is I always connect with local people that I can get back in touch with, restaurant owners, librarians, historians, and the most important people I found are the director of the Chamber of Commerce. They're always very helpful and give me insight I wouldn't otherwise know. And I was in back and forth communication with them. In fact, I send the manuscript to them at the end before it's published to make sure that I don't have errors in there about what the particulars are in the setting. So those are the things that I work on to make the setting work. The storytelling is just I'm a movie maker in my head. So I'm seeing a movie evolve, and I'm trying my best to try to tell that story in a way that people would keep people riveted to their seats if they were watching the movie. That's the best way I can explain it.
It really did. Your writing is so visual for the reader. It's just no wonder your books have garnered so many awards. They really are award-winning books, and it's very gripping for the reader. I just love these books, page turning, as they say, but truly visual. You feel like you're there as the reader. I wanted to talk about Erin for a minute. Erin is very supportive partner for Daryl. And although she's not sensitive to paranormal activity as Daryl is, she has her own strengths and skills that contribute to solving the mystery. So without giving away any spoilers or anything, can you tell our listeners a little about Erin?
Yeah, Erin, well, in Blood on the Chesapeake, in the first book, Daryl's journey begins because he's been dumped at the altar by his former fiance. He's actually a native, a Midwesterner from Michigan, and he decides he wants to go anywhere but here and get away, and he ends up getting this dream job on the Eastern Shore. And then he's only there about a couple of weeks, and he's introduced to this incredibly beautiful nurse, an OB nurse named Erin Cavity, who's a local in the area. So she helps him navigate his new town, and he very quickly falls in love with her. Now, they have their own problems. He ends up getting in trouble with her partway through the second book and stuff, but they manage to find their way through that. And what he finds is that he makes a comment later that she makes him braver. So she's able to give him the courage to do the things he knows he should do, but is sometimes scared to be able to take that next step. And I think the fact that she, even though is not a sensitive and is a skeptic at first, the fact that she believes him wholeheartedly because she loves him is enough to make him want her as his partner. He says it more than once in the three books that she's a little out of his league, but he got lucky in getting her anyway, and that's exactly how he feels about it. And it's true, she is out of his league in many ways.
Well, they're a beautiful duo together. I just love the way they interact. Something else about your writing style that just captivated me. You begin each chapter of Scarlet at Crystal River with an intriguing, concise phrase or sentence that foreshadows, or sometimes it's almost a premonition of what's to come. And I love these. I got so that I was looking forward to what the next one would be at the next chapter. What prompted you to include this in your writing style? And as you're writing your book, how do you plan what you'll include in each chapter as you approach it?
I think the best way to answer the plan question, I'll do that one first, is that I'm kind of halfway between a plotter and a pantser. I do about half, maybe a little more than half of the book. I have some kind of general outline, although no one but me would recognize it as an outline, but I would have an outline of what I think I want to happen in different chapters. And I work my way through that portion of the book. And then by the time I get to those portions, I know my brain is telling me what's going to happen in the successive chapters. So, I mean, that's kind of organically how it evolves. Now, there are a couple of things that I do different than others do. So here's one of the things. It's not a secret. It's just kind of my strategy. In each of the three books, I had purposely not decided who the ultimate villain was going to be until about the third or fourth last chapter.
Oh,
so
wow.
I have deliberately, even for myself, I had made it so that it could be him. No, it could be her. Well, what if it's her? So I'm keeping that in suspense and making sure that there are clues laid for each possible bad guy, antagonist, until I get to them. I think that keeps some of the tension in the story at a little higher level. I'm not one of these that works backwards and say, well, so-and-so did it, and here's how that's not how it works. The culprit at the end has to make sense. Has to be, the readers have to read that and go, yeah, okay, I see how that now. So that's part of the answer to the question. The other answer to your question is, I will tell you, now I've learned from some very good writers, and I have tried my best to not imitate them, but emulate them. I work very, very hard on my chapter endings and my chapter beginnings. And I will often decide how much is going into a chapter based on where I can find a really good cliffhanger and where I can find a really good beginning. And whether that chapter is 4 pages, I do have kind of I try to keep the chapters around 4 to 6 pages, but it might be 4, might be 6, might be 7. It might be 3, but I let that tension, that dramatic storytelling drive where those begin and end, because my goal is to have the reader come to the end of the chapter and go, I'm not stopping now. What the heck is coming on the next page? And then I work really hard so that the first line of the next page goes, they go, what? Okay, what's going on next? So to try to keep the reader reading.
Well, you certainly do that very effectively. The pacing and the tension level, as you say, is just, it's so good. It truly is page turning. A big clue to the identity of the 2 children in Scarlet at Crystal River is a unique portrait, which to Daryl appears to have special powers. It's painted by an artist that Daryl and Aaron meet. This artist is based on a real person, as you say in your notes about the book. Can you tell our listeners, without giving too much away, because this is a big clue, tell them a little about this portrait in the book and about the live artist that the character is based on?
I'd be happy to, because I'm really, first of all, I need to tell you before I do that, my wife is an artist, so I've been married to an artist for decades, and so she's helped me to appreciate the really remarkable talent of a visual artist. And this young man has a remarkable talent. His name is Jared Emerson, and your listeners, whether they're interested in my book or not, should look his work up on the web. My wife and I met him on a cruise. It's one of those idiosyncratic moments. We were sitting at a dinner table, and they sat us with other people we didn't know, which is what we like. And across the table is Jared and his agent, Jean. And we're talking, and we exchange things. And my wife tells she's an art teacher, and he says, "Oh, my art teacher's the artist." Jared said, "My art teacher saved me in school, because he, like a lot of artists, he was kind of, a standout, kind of an unusual guy." Anyway, I learned from him, he paints with his hands. He's one of these performance artists. He doesn't use brushes very much. He paints with his hands, and he will do a painting of somebody famous. He was actually on the boat painting a picture of Bean Joe Green from the Pittsburgh Steelers for a group of Steeler people,
Oh.
But he paints and he'll do it in like 10 minutes.
Wow.
He has a thing on the web called The Face of God that he paints on the web live on this, that's been taped in 6 minutes. That is the face of Jesus, and it's absolutely incredible. He's a very serious Christian and infuses his ministry into his work. So I was just beginning the research on the book when we met and said, "Would you have an interest in having me?" He said, "Yeah, that'd be great." So we've communicated back and forth and stuff, and I sent him copies of the earlier books to let him know the quality of my work, and he said, "I'd love to." In fact, he actually contributed some ideas to how the story was developed, even though the Jared in the book takes place before he ever gets famous, no one ever hears him or anything else. He's just getting started. But it was great fun including that element in the story.
Oh, the clue is fantastic. Using that as a clue in the story, readers, listeners, when you read this book, you're going to love that. It's just so well placed. It's beautifully done.
Thank you.
And speaking of reading, Wendy and I have had the good fortune of reading 2 of your books. I was wondering if you would read an excerpt for our listeners.
I would be delighted to. I decided I would choose an excerpt that I think is a good one from Scarlet at Crystal River. I'll do just a little bit of lead in before we start to kind of give readers an understanding of what's going on. As I mentioned, that the 2 ghosts in the story are young Latino children, 5 or 6 years old, and Daryl's investigation ends up leading him to a settlement camp of migrant workers, where they're asking questions and trying to find out exactly what happened to these children, and then how is Daryl supposed to help them. Daryl, his wife Erin, and a young man who's helping him, Luis, is driving on their way back, having a conversation about what they've learned when this scene occurs. Daryl started to say, like I said back there, it's complicated. Erin's side window exploded. The fractured glass shot slivers across the front seat. The sound of the explosion following a beat behind. Erin screamed. Something stung Daryl's right arm. He grabbed a cut on his skin and then looked across the seat. Damn, Erin's arm was bleeding. Bad. He couldn't breathe. Erin! He stared at her for a second, then jerked his gaze back to the road and straightened the car. Something hit the rear window. Luis yelped. The glass shattered, and a second later, another crack followed. Luis fell forward. Was he hit? Daryl's gaze jumped from the road to Erin to the back seat. Luis had fallen to the floor. Daryl couldn't see him. Luis, Erin called. No answer. Dragging his eyes from the road, Daryl shot another glance at Erin. Her entire arm was now turning red, the edge of her short sleeve wicking up the scarlet. The fingers of her left hand gripped tight around her right arm, the knuckles turning white. The blood still seeped through. Dragging his eyes from Erin for a second, he turned in his seat to try to look into the back. He screamed, Luis! Daryl wrenched farther around to look, and his leg bumped the steering wheel. He heard an ugly thump. Too late, he jerked back to see the car. He jerked back around to see the car careen over the berm. In 3 seconds, it slammed into a tree. He heard another explosion and was slammed back against the seat. Everything went dark.
Yep, that's the kind of scenes I remember from Cape May. Love that. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank
You're
you
welcome.
for the reading. Yes, listeners, now you can see what we're talking about. Oh my gosh. It's just, you just want to dive into it. Thank you so much, Randy Overbeck, for joining us for a novel talk. Can you tell us anything about what's next that readers can look forward to from you?
Yes, I can. I'm very pleased with the response that the 3 books, Haunted Shores Mysteries, have had. I originally planned it as a trilogy, but I've gotten such great response from readers. There will be another 4th one coming down, but my next project is actually a new amateur sleuth mystery. One again set in schools, this time a middle school. Where a group of young kids, 5th graders, get a hold of a new illicit drug, crash a car, and 5 of them die. And the school is doing an investigation to find out who's behind the drugs coming into their schools. It's almost to the point of being ready to send to the publisher right now. So I'm really excited about it. I think the readers are going to enjoy it. It's a big difference. It has 7 different POVs in the story, so it's a real challenge for me to be able to pull it off. But I'm excited about it.
Well, I think if anybody can, you can. That sounds fantastic, and yet another, sort of contemporary social issue that you are dealing with in your book, which you do in these other Haunted Shores mysteries as well. This contemporary social issue that is presented in your books, and it really, that's part of what's so gripping for the reader, I think.
And Wendy, I appreciate you mentioning that. I worked really, really hard on that to try to make sure that. First of all, I believe it's really important. A novelist friend of mine called S.J. Roseanne once said at a conference, nonfiction is about reality, fiction is about truth. And I try to use my fiction to tell truths about what I think are important issues, racial injustice, blood on the Chesapeake, the scourge of human trafficking in Crimson at Cape May, and then, of course, in Scarlet at Crystal River, it's our abuse of migrant workers. And these are things that are very much overlooked or misunderstood. And I'm hoping that my stories, in addition to giving people a very interesting read and a fun paranormal mystery, can maybe at least get them thinking a little bit about each of these important social issues. That's my goal anyway.
Beautiful, and it's beautifully done too. Listeners, you will want to check out the website authorrandyoverbeck.com for more information about the author and his multiple award-winning books. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And remember, a novel read leads to a novel talk.